It is the 32nd millennium. 7 centuries after the death of Horus Lupercal, Chaos Astartes once more roam Imperial space, eager for war. Through a combination of luck, tenacity, and a good eye for choosing his subordinates, Abaddon rid himself of 2 fierce opponents. Sigismund, High Marshal of the Black Templars, met his end in his duel with Ezekiel. Darovec, Lord of the Legion host, was slain by Iskandar. After their Pyrrhic victory during the First Battle of Cadia, the Black Legion must now decide how to carry on their incursion into Imperial space and claim the demon sword Drach'nyen. Meanwhile, in your own quest for magical artifacts, we've got a deal with none of the Chaos Gods' filthy strings attached, coming to you from our sponsor today, Everything Dice. As you might guess, they provide the absolute epitome of beauty in the world of dice and everything around them. These jewels of many numbers are handcrafted from resin by the Everything Dice team, and come in a massive variety of designs, both in terms of style, embellishments, shape, weight, and theme. But all of them are, as you can see, mesmerizingly pretty. They're balanced for casual play on the tabletop, so if you're running any kind of dice-based games, you can roll up in style with all kinds of themed dice and accessories. We got 2 packs with various side counts and numbers, and even the packaging was rather beautiful. Needless to say, with the holiday season coming up, these dice will make great gifts for fellow tabletop players. And don't pay full price for them. If you go to everythingdice.com/discount/Wizwa or use the discount code Wizwa, you will get 15% off your first order. Fortune truly favours the bold, and no warrior of the Legiones Astartes had ever been as daring as Ezekiel Abaddon. Though at a great cost to himself and his fleet, Abaddon had ridden himself of his 2 main rivals in a single battle. Snatching victory from the jaws of defeat, the Black Legion now found itself scattered amongst hostile Imperial stars. Abaddon was severely stricken and confined to an amniotic tank where his wounds could heal. Many members of the Ezekarian had written their lord off as dead after his duel with Sigismund. The Chaos Gods, however, were not done yet with such a promising servant. Ezekiel would slowly recover from his injuries, both owing to his unbreakable will and the favour of the ruinous powers. Time was of the essence. Abaddon had declared war against the entire Imperium by sending Sigismund's mutilated body back to Terra. Loyalist reinforcements were bound to arrive sooner rather than later. The Black Legion needed to regroup immediately, repair their damaged fleet, and prosecute an organised campaign against their enemy. Aboard the command deck of the Vengeful Spirit, plans were laid and debated. Targets were selected, scout ships were sent ahead, and flotillas were organised. Abaddon made use of all his charisma and leadership to strengthen his position. Through sorcerous means, threats, and promises, he united his fleet once again. His numbers were further strengthened by elements from Darovec's routed forces. Reinforcements also came from all across the galaxy. Pirates, brigands, and all sorts of dregs now had a warlord they could rally around. These lawless elements were previously but a thorn in the Imperium's side, yet they posed a serious threat under united leadership. Though the loyalty of these fair-weather friends could certainly not be counted upon, Abaddon was confident he could make effective strategic use of them. So it was that the systems of the Segmentum Obscurus burned. Abaddon took his forces on a genocidal campaign through the soft underbelly of the Imperium. For more than a decade, the sparsely defended worlds of the Segmentum suffered terribly under the sadistic touch of the Chaos Astartes. The folly of the High Lords in ignoring Sigismund's warnings was now plain for all to see. Everything the High Marshal had cautioned them against had tragically come to pass, and the Imperium was woefully unprepared to stem the chaos tide. For all his brutish appearance and legendary temper, Ezekiel was a cunning strategist. He knew full well that defeat was all but assured if he allowed the Imperium to draw his forces into one decisive battle. Though he had managed to create the largest chaos army the galaxy had seen since the Horus Heresy, his host was still but a shadow of what his father had fielded against the Emperor 7 centuries ago. His only hope for success was to run circles around the lumbering Imperial juggernaut. He meant to confuse his adversary and keep him occupied until he could finally claim his true prize, the demon blade Drach'nyen. Ever a good judge of character, or at least of military abilities, Abaddon selected his generals and gave them control of sections of his fleet. Like the tribal chiefs of ancient Terra, he would pit them against each other in a grand display of martial might across the stars. The First Black Crusade would be an orgy of cruelty and violence in honor of the Great Four, and Abaddon's lieutenants fell upon their task with great enthusiasm. This was the perfect chance for them to right the wrongs of the heresy. Now that they were finally free of the Eye of Terror, the traitor Astartes would seize any and all opportunity to wash away the shame of their defeat in Imperial blood. The Black Legion forces thus split into many small branches, each with its own targets and priorities. They took advantage of the lackluster Imperial response to pillage and loot to their heart's content. Vast flotillas filled their cargoes with slaves, depleting entire planetary populations and exterminating the rest via orbital bombardment. Precious armaments and equipment were stolen from Forge Worlds, offering the first real chance the traitors had ever seen to replenish and maintain their ships and men. Slowly but surely, the Black Legion strengthened its position, recovering from its losses from the First Battle of Cadia. Ezekiel had once again chosen well. His captains completed their tasks with admirable and ruthless efficiency. The destruction they wrought was so terrible that its scars would still be visible 10,000 years in the future. This was undoubtedly the greatest moment in the history of the Black Legion, and with every fallen world, the name of Abaddon was carried across the field of carnage by thousands of transhuman voices. The worst of the fighting initially took place in the star systems next to the Eye of Terror. Most of the inhabitable worlds in that region did not even have Imperial Guard regiments to protect them. At best, they would be garrisoned by bare-bones Planetary Defense Forces, or PDFs. Such troops formed the basic garrison of any Imperial world. Their main duty was to maintain order on their planet and deter potential piratical raids. Yet no PDF could ever hope to stand in the face of such a chaotic onslaught. Equipped with rudimentary autoguns, devoid of armoured elements, and incapable of conducting complicated maneuvers or void warfare, the unfortunate PDFs might as well have been unarmed in front of heretic Astartes. Most of these troopers either dropped their weapons or joined up with the invaders, driven mad by the insidious influence of the archenemy. Chaos cults spread across Imperial worlds like a cancer, further hampering loyalist resistance. Corruption had always been Chaos's greatest weapon, and here it was once again in full effect. Thousands of maddened civilians rose up and threw themselves at their own defenders, tearing them apart with their bare hands while chanting the names of gods they did not know. Heretic sorcerers sacrificed hundreds to the whims of their dark masters, calling forth demons from the warp to join in the slaughter. From across the Segmentum Obscurus, thousands of astropathic choirs screamed in horror across the stars. Their desperate cries for help raced across the Immaterium to reach the throne world itself. Taken entirely aback, the Imperium of Man scrambled to organize its response. For the first time since the heresy, Rabute Guilliman's military reforms would be put to the test. Gone were the days of the great Space Marine legions. After penning his seminal work, the Codex Astartes, the Primarch of the Ultramarines had ordered each legion be disbanded into smaller chapters of no more than 1,000 Space Marines. This reform meant to ensure that no single individual could ever again wield the might of a legion, and thus threaten the entire galaxy as Horus did. Yet even though the newly founded Adeptus Astartes were now smaller and weaker than the old Legiones Astartes, they were also significantly more flexible. They could thus operate as a scalpel rather than a hammer, and would form the Imperium's first response against chaos while the bulk of its forces gathered. Many of these second founding chapters were thus sent to intercept and impede Abaddon's forces. Though they now bore different names and colours, the sons of the loyalist Primarchs waged war with the same ferocity their progenitors had shown during the heresy. Imperial High Command laid out its plans of action. Abaddon's final target must be Terra itself. Surely Horus's first son meant to claim the Emperor's head and avenge his fallen father. The throne world thus had to be defended at all costs. Abaddon, however, had no interest in Holy Terror. While his forces slaughtered their way through the stars, he would look for the demon sword Drach'nyen. Playing the part of the reckless brute, Ezekiel was more than happy to let his foes misinterpret his objectives. After all, if the enemy did not know his plans, they could not defy them. So effective was Abaddon's deception that his true plans would not be discovered for 10,000 years, where the insidious aim of each Black Crusade would culminate in the worst Imperial defeat in history. The lamentable catalogue of human crimes committed by the heretics during those years would be too long to describe. At any rate, Imperial propaganda censored much of what happened during the Black Crusades. Yet the fate of some worlds stood out from the rest in the horror visited upon them. Among the many competing champions in the service of Abaddon, 2 lieutenants distinguished themselves in their fierce competition to prove their worth. Xegtian the Broken and the Chaos Raptor Erelak would do everything in their power to outdo each other's cruelty. Xegtian invaded the agri-world of Valesia, while Erelak set foot on the hive world of Melfia. Xegtian was a devout follower of the Dark Prince Slaanesh, and immediately set to please his capricious god. Valesia's defenders were swiftly slaughtered, and the planet made compliant. Upon imposing his will on the agri-world, Xegtian started to enjoy himself. In a sadistic display of irony, the planet's fauna was turned against the countless workers who had spent their lives tending to it. The Chaos Lord called upon the power of the god of excess to conjure beautiful, ornate, and intricate labyrinths of thorns and brambles. Every Valesian who had survived the purges was then blinded and set loose within the maze. There, these wretched souls were hunted for sport by the Slaaneshi Lord. For days, the planet echoed with the screams of terrified men, women, and children, begging the Emperor to save them from the monster that came for their lives and the thorns that tore at their flesh. Driven mad by pain and fear, the blinded Valesians would hurl themselves against the brambles whenever they heard Xegtian approaching, cutting themselves to pieces in their effort to escape. The soil drank their blood greedily, and with every drop of vitae, breathtaking roses of the deepest red sprouted in glory to Slaanesh. Like a spider feeding on a fly, the garden gorged itself on the dead, and all around the planet, the laughter of an ever-thirsting god could be heard. Not to be outdone, Erelak began his desecration of Melfia. Once a glorious achievement of human engineering and mechanicus brilliance, Melfia's famous floating hives would be turned against her. Erelak descended upon the world at the head of his raptor squads, butchering any PDF troopers brave enough to oppose them. Once resistance had been quashed, he destroyed the hive's barely understood anti-grav drives, sending entire cities plummeting to the ground. Billions died in seconds in one of the worst acts of genocide of the war. However, Erelak would spare a few floating hives to honor the ruinous powers. Turning them into city-sized suspended gallows, the Chaos Lords strung millions of Imperial citizens to stand as trophies and offerings to the Great Four. What was left of Melfia's population now hung thousands of meters above the ground, gently swaying from the platforms they had lived on for generations. History does not say whether Xegtian's showmanship or Erelak's efficiency won the contest, yet the gods surely noticed the efforts of their devoted servants. Under the cover of the madness unleashed by his forces, Abaddon was free to prosecute his search for the demon blade. For 10 years he wandered Imperial space, searching for his quarry to no avail. The quest consumed the former first captain. To him, nothing else in the galaxy mattered. Tired of roaming aimlessly through the stars, looking for a prize he knew would forever elude him, Abaddon let go of his pride and resorted to the one solution he despised above all others. Unlike his father, whom Ezekiel had witnessed descend into madness under the influence of the ruinous powers, Abaddon had vowed never to become a slave to the Chaos Gods. Yet his need was great and his options were running out. Sooner or later, the Imperial response would become too great for his forces to handle. Abaddon thus decided to beseech the Great Four for their guidance. In exchange for their help, the Black Legion would redouble their genocidal campaigns against the followers of the hated Corpse Emperor, dedicating every harvested soul to the glory of the Dark Pantheon. Satisfied with this show of devotion and humility from their most rebellious servant, the Chaos Gods sealed their demonic pact and finally deigned to assist their champion. They gifted Abaddon with knowledge of the location of the world of Nurlan. There, the gods promised Ezekiel would find the Tower of Silence, within which Drach'nyen would be his to claim. Abaddon did not thank his would-be masters. He knew in his heart that the Great Four would never offer up a prize so easily. When it came to chaos, there was always a catch. Nurlan was known to the Black Legion, if only by reputation. It was whispered among Abaddon's demonologists to be a place of dread, where the Chaos Gods themselves would lock away their secrets. The road would be fraught with danger. Unholy wards prevented any would-be visitor from approaching Nurlan. Iskandar and a few other Black Legion sorcerers were left with the task of making use of all their skills to navigate the fleet to its destination. After much toil and sacrifice, both figurative and literal, they finally managed to land on the demon world. Leaving behind his captains to prosecute the war against the Imperials, Abaddon made for the Tower of Silence, surrounded by his most lethal and loyal veterans. These dreaded bodyguards of picked men were known as the Bringers of Despair. They were, to a man, veterans of the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, and each of them had survived thousands of campaigns against the worst the galaxy had to offer. Clad in jet-black Terminator armor, they were more than a match for any loyalist honor guard the Adeptus Astartes could field, and bore demonic blessings and weaponry to prove it. Abaddon was no fool. He knew the Tower of Silence would be the ultimate test of his skills as a leader and a warrior. Laying the Talon of Horus on the door, he entered the tower without a hint of hesitation, his loyal veterans in tow. Few living souls remain to tell the tale of Abaddon's trials. What is known, however, is that the warband was immediately beset by the tower's many guardians. Whatever horrors delved in the madness of the Eye of Terra or the bowels of the Vengeful Spirit paled in comparison to the eldritch abominations the Chaos Gods had condemned for all eternity upon Nurlan. Ancient constructs of unknown making and unnamed horrors that could tear through Terminator armor almost with ease fell upon the Astartes. One by one, the members of the Bringers of Despair were claimed, body and soul, by the tower. Though they fought with a skill and ferocity that would have made their Gene Father proud, Abaddon's warband would not last for long in the labyrinthian corridors they were roaming. After countless harrowing battles, Abaddon and his men clawed, hacked and slew their way into the heart of the tower. With every step they took, the madness around them increased. Gravity itself turned against the Black Legionnaires, who now walked and fought on the ceiling, the immensity of the sky lying beneath them. Not one chamber resembled the next, and unseemly mutations emanating from all four of the Chaos Gods could be seen everywhere. Abaddon wandered through these halls for what seemed like an age, until the last of his men fell by his side. Having reached the end of his superhuman abilities, Ezekiel resolved himself to die defiant. He slew ceaselessly until his sword arm was finally numb with pain and exhaustion. When the despoiler was finally at his rope's end, the true guardian of the tower appeared. A perfect figure, wreathed in golden light, stood before Abaddon. Ezekiel raised his sword. If he were to die, he would die as a warrior should. The light emanating from the figure was so bright that not even an Astartes' eyes could adapt to it. Abaddon demanded the creature reveal itself to him, but the Golden Warrior simply beckoned for him to follow. Silent to all of Abaddon's questions, the golden figure led the way to the center of the maze, where a shard of darkness hung in the air. Where the golden figure radiated light, the shard seemed to absorb it, a perfect contrast that befuddled the senses. Reaching into the emptiness, Abaddon's armored hand clasped around a cold, solid object. Yanking his arm free from the void, he raised his hand before him. The darkness in his palm drew shape, coalescing into a cruel blade that had once threatened the Emperor himself. After 10 years of endless war and loss, Abaddon, the new War Master of Chaos, finally held in his hands the prize for which so many had lost their lives. The echo of the first murder, and the ender of empires was finally his. Drach'nyen was claimed. The consequences of Abaddon's triumph will be covered in our next episode on the Black Crusade. To ensure you don't miss that, make sure you have subscribed and press the bell button. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.